What if the world's greatest heroes were secretly its biggest villains? That's the terrifying idea behind this story, a world where the people celebrated as protectors are often the very people causing the destruction. And before we get into everything, make sure to like and subscribe, because this isn't your average superhero show. This is a brutal, chaotic, often shocking story about power, corruption, revenge, and what happens when people with godlike abilities stop answering to anyone. It all begins with Hughie Campbell, an ordinary guy living an ordinary life until everything changes in a single horrifying moment. While standing on a sidewalk talking to his girlfriend Robin, she is suddenly killed in an instant when A-Train, one of the world's most famous superheroes, runs straight through her at super speed. 1 second Hughie is talking to the person he loves, and the next he is standing in complete shock, covered in blood, trying to understand what just happened. It is violent, sudden, and completely senseless. But even worse than Robin's death is how casually the system responds. Vought International, the corporation that controls superheroes, immediately treats it as a public relations issue. They offer Hughie compensation, legal paperwork, and silence. To them, it is just damage control. But for Hughie, it becomes the moment his entire understanding of the world begins to collapse. That grief turns into anger, and that anger leads him to Billy Butcher, a ruthless and deeply cynical man who has dedicated his life to taking down superheroes. Butcher shows Hughie a reality the public doesn't see. In this world, superheroes are not selfless protectors. They are celebrities, weapons, products marketed by Vought to the public. Their heroism is often staged. Their morality is performative. Their public image hides a much darker truth. Butcher recruits Hughie into a mission far bigger than personal revenge. He introduces him to a group known as the Boys, an underground team dedicated to exposing and destroying corrupt Supes. At the same time, we are introduced to the Seven, the most powerful superhero team in the world. To the public, they represent hope, justice, and strength. But behind closed doors, they are broken, dangerous, and often monstrous. At the center of them all is Homelander, a man who initially appears to be the ultimate hero. He is charismatic, patriotic, admired by millions. But beneath that image, he is emotionally unstable, narcissistic, manipulative, and terrifyingly violent. He doesn't simply abuse power, he embodies what unchecked power becomes. Every scene involving him carries tension because you never know whether he will smile or kill someone. Then there is Starlight, Annie January, who enters the Seven believing she has achieved her dream of becoming a real hero. She wants to help people. She believes in justice. But almost immediately that dream begins to collapse. She discovers the world of superheroes is built on corruption, exploitation, and abuse. Her assault by the Deep exposes the rot at the center of the organization, and from that moment her storyline becomes one of resisting corruption while trapped inside it. Unlike the others, she still wants to be good in a system designed to crush goodness. Meanwhile, Butcher's team grows stronger. Mother's Milk brings discipline and logic. Frenchie brings chaos and ingenuity. Kimiko, a traumatized woman turned weapon through experimentation, becomes one of the most dangerous and emotionally complex members of the group. Together, they begin uncovering Vaught's biggest secret, Compound V, a chemical secretly used to create superheroes. This changes everything. Supes are not born chosen. They are manufactured. Their godlike status is built on a lie. As Hughie becomes deeper involved in this war, he forms an unexpected connection with Starlight. Their relationship becomes one of the emotional cores of the series, complicated by the fact that they exist on opposite sides of a conflict neither fully understands at first. Their growing trust gives the story moments of humanity in a world otherwise filled with brutality. But the deeper the story goes, the darker Homelander becomes. One of the most disturbing things about him is that he does not simply make immoral choices. He often does horrific things while believing he is justified. His need for control and worship is constant, and as cracks begin forming in the image he presents to the world, he becomes increasingly unstable. At the same time, Butcher's hatred of Homelander is revealed to be deeply personal. Years earlier, his wife Becca disappeared after an encounter with Homelander, and Butcher has always believed Homelander assaulted and killed her. This trauma fuels everything he does. It is not just revenge for him, it is obsession. As Season 1 progresses, the conspiracy surrounding Compound 5 grows, Hughie becomes increasingly willing to cross moral lines he once never would have crossed, and the boys move from exposing individual crimes to declaring war on Vought itself. But then comes one of the biggest twists of the season. Butcher discovers Becca is alive, not dead, hidden, and even more shocking, she has been raising Homelander's son. That revelation changes everything, because now this isn't just about destroying Homelander, it's about a child who may become something even worse. Season 2 expands everything. The conflict is no longer hidden in shadows. It is escalating into open war. A new Supe named Stormfront enters the Seven and at first appears rebellious, charismatic, and anti-corporate. But she quickly reveals herself as one of the darkest threats the series has introduced. She is not just powerful. She carries a terrifying ideology rooted in supremacy and domination, and her alliance with Homelander makes both of them even more dangerous. At the same time, Homelander becomes obsessed with his son Ryan, seeing him as an extension of himself and trying to shape him in his image. Butcher, meanwhile, becomes increasingly protective of Ryan despite the fact the boy is Homelander's son. This creates one of the most fascinating tensions in the series. Ryan represents both innocence and the possibility of becoming something catastrophic. Meanwhile, Starlight begins actively working against Vought from within, becoming far more central to the fight. Her relationship with Hughie deepens, but so do the risks around them. They are no longer just surviving. They are openly challenging a system built to destroy anyone who resists it. As Stormfront's true nature is exposed, the story escalates toward full confrontation. Her influence over Homelander pushes him further toward authoritarian madness while public unrest grows. The final battle of Season 2 becomes explosive and deeply personal, culminating in Ryan using his powers in a devastating moment that kills Stormfront but also unintentionally kills Becca. Becca's death breaks Butcher, yet it also changes him, because now Ryan becomes his responsibility, and Homelander loses the one thing he believed belonged to him. Season 3 pushes everything into even darker territory. The war against Homelander begins to feel almost impossible, because he has become too powerful politically, physically, and psychologically. This is where desperation drives characters into choices they never imagined making. Butcher and Hughie begin using temporary Compound V to gain powers themselves. It gives Butcher abilities frighteningly similar to Homelander's, raising a terrifying question. In trying to destroy monsters, are they becoming them? At the same time, Soldier Boy enters the story. Once believed a legendary hero, he turns out to be another deeply damaged weapon created by violence and abuse. His arrival changes the balance of power entirely because for the first time, there may be something capable of killing Homelander. But nothing is simple, because Soldier Boy is as dangerous as the thing they want him to destroy. This season also pushes Homelander fully into open instability. He begins caring less about maintaining the illusion of goodness and more about forcing the world to accept him as he truly is. And that makes him even more frightening. Meanwhile, the relationship between Hughie and Starlight begins fracturing under pressure. Hughie's insecurities and obsession with being useful drive him toward dangerous decisions, while Annie refuses to compromise her principles. Their conflict reflects one of the show's biggest themes: what power does to people, even those trying to use it for good. Then comes Herogasm, one of the most infamous turning points in the entire show. What initially seems chaotic and absurd becomes one of the biggest confrontations in the series, as Butcher, Soldier Boy, and Hughie nearly succeed in taking down Homelander. Nearly, but failure has consequences, because every time Homelander survives, he becomes harder to stop. The season builds toward a finale where alliances fracture, loyalties shift, and the mission to kill Homelander collapses into chaos. Soldier Boy becomes the threat everyone has to stop. Ryan chooses Homelander, and in one of the most disturbing final moments of the season, Homelander openly murders a man in public, and instead of turning against him, part of the crowd cheers. That changes everything, because now the story is no longer just about corrupt superheroes. It is about power becoming ideology, and people embracing it. By the end of Season 3, the world feels far more dangerous than it did at the beginning. Hughie has changed. Butcher is dying because of temporary V use. Homelander is stronger politically than ever. Ryan is moving closer to his father's influence. And the war that started with one accidental death has become something much bigger than revenge. It has become a fight for the future itself. By this point in the story, everything has changed. What started as one man seeking revenge against a corrupt superhero has turned into something far larger, almost like a war over the future itself. The world feels unstable, as if it's balancing on the edge of collapse, and that tension hangs over everything moving into the next phase of the story. Homelander is no longer hiding behind the image of being the perfect hero. In earlier seasons, he still cared about being loved, admired, and accepted, but now that desire has started transforming into something darker. It's no longer enough for people to love him. He wants obedience. He wants control. He begins acting less like a celebrity superhero and more like a figure building a movement around himself, and that makes him even more dangerous than before. Now, one of the biggest focuses in this stage of the story is Ryan, because he has become far more than just Homelander's son. He represents the future of everything. Ryan is caught between two influences pulling him in opposite directions. On one side is Butcher, who sees protecting him almost as a final promise he has to keep, a way of honoring Becca and maybe redeeming some part of himself. On the other side is Homelander, who sees Ryan as an extension of his own legacy, someone he can shape into something powerful and terrifying. What makes Ryan's storyline so compelling is that you never fully know which direction he's going to go. He still has innocence, but there are moments where you can see flashes of darkness, moments, and those moments carry huge weight because the story keeps asking whether Ryan could become humanity's salvation, or its biggest threat. At the same time, Butcher is operating under a new kind of pressure because he learns the temporary Compound 5 has left him dying. For someone as obsessive and relentless as Butcher, that changes everything. Every move now carries urgency. He's no longer fighting with the belief there will always be another chance later. He feels like he's running out of time, and that desperation makes him even more reckless. Throughout the season, there's this growing sense that Butcher may be willing to go farther than ever before, even crossing moral lines he once claimed separated him from the monsters he hates. And that becomes one of the most important tensions in the story, whether Butcher, in trying to destroy monsters, is slowly becoming one himself. Hughie, meanwhile, has evolved so much from where he started that he almost feels like a completely different person. He began this story as someone powerless, traumatized, and uncertain, but years of fighting alongside the boys have changed him. Still, unlike Butcher, Hughie keeps struggling to hold on to his humanity. He understands the temptation of power, the lure of using extreme methods, but he also sees what that path can do to a person. His role increasingly feels like someone trying to keep the group from losing itself completely. Starlight also becomes more central than ever, not just as a former member of the Seven, but as a symbol of resistance against Vought and Homelander. She has gone from naive idealist to someone openly challenging the entire system, and her storyline in this part of the story is about no longer simply surviving corruption, but actively fighting it. What makes her so important is that she still represents a belief that power can be used differently, that people can resist becoming what they fight. At the same time, the world around them is becoming more unstable. Vought is no longer just a corporation controlling superheroes. It has become something woven into politics, culture, and public belief itself. Homelander's growing influence starts feeling almost cult-like as his supporters embrace him not despite his instability, but because of it. That shift makes the threat much larger than one villain. It turns the conflict into something ideological, something rooted in how people respond to fear, power, and manipulation. As the season unfolds, Homelander himself becomes even more unsettling because he starts confronting the trauma of his own origins. The story digs deeper into how he was created and raised, not as a love child, but as a weapon. These moments don't make him sympathetic in a simple way, but they add disturbing depth to what he has become. He isn't just evil for the sake of being evil, he is the product of unchecked power fused with profound emotional damage. And that complexity makes him far scarier, because it means his violence often feels tied to genuine psychological instability rather than cold calculation alone. Meanwhile, the boys themselves begin straining under the weight of everything they've been through. Old resentments rise to the surface, strategies clash, loyalties are tested. There's a sense that the group could fracture at any point, and that tension runs beneath even their quieter moments. But despite that pressure, they keep moving because they know stopping isn't an option anymore. The stakes are too high. Another major layer of this part of the story is the growing sense that events are building towards something much larger than anything seen before. It's not just individual conflicts escalating. It feels like the whole world is moving toward open confrontation. The experiments tied to Supes, the political instability, the growing extremism surrounding Homelander, all of it starts feeling like setup for a final war rather than just another season of conflict. Ryan remains central to all of this. Some of the most unsettling moments come from watching him struggle under Homelander's influence. There are times where he still seems like a confused child wanting guidance, and other moments where glimpses of something darker emerge. Those scenes matter because Ryan isn't just another character anymore. He has become the question the whole story may ultimately hinge on. Can he break free from the legacy he was born into, or is he destined to become part of it? That uncertainty creates tension in nearly every scene involving him. As the story pushes toward its later episodes, Homelander grows even bolder, increasingly unconcerned with hiding his true nature. Institutions seem weaker, resistance feels fragile, violence feels closer, and the atmosphere begins carrying the sense that society itself is nearing a breaking point. The show starts feeling less like satire and more like something almost apocalyptic. And through all of it, Butcher grows more desperate, because if he is truly dying, then every decision may be his last meaningful one. That possibility makes his scenes feel heavier, especially as it becomes clear he may be willing to do something catastrophic if he believes it will stop Homelander. As everything builds toward the latest finale, it becomes clear the story is no longer moving through ordinary escalation. It is moving toward reckoning. The finale doesn't feel like closure so much as ignition. It feels like all the pieces are finally positioned for what comes next. Homelander has never been more powerful, Butcher has never been more dangerous, Ryan has never been more pivotal, and the world has never felt closer to collapse. That's what makes the setup for Season 5 feel so strong. It doesn't feel like the story simply continuing. It feels like everything from the very beginning has been building toward this. Robin's death, Compound V, Becca, Ryan, Soldier Boy, the fall of Vought's illusions, Homelander's unraveling. It all feels connected now in a way that points toward final collision, and hanging over all of it is the possibility that Butcher himself may become one of the story's greatest threats, because the series has always asked whether fighting monsters can slowly turn you into one, and by now Butcher stands closer to that line than ever. There's also the lingering possibility that old weapons like Soldier Boy could return, because in a story built on unstable alliances, even past enemies can become necessary. That uncertainty keeps everything unpredictable. No one feels safe. No outcome feels simple, no victory feels clean, and unlike traditional superhero stories, this one has never suggested the good guys win simply because they deserve to. Winning here always costs something, sometimes everything. By now, Hughie has transformed into someone capable of standing in a war he never asked for, and he has become a force of resistance. Mother's Milk remains the moral center, trying to stop everyone from losing themselves. Frenchie and Kimiko continue fighting for some sense of humanity despite all the violence surrounding them. And all of them are moving toward what feels like one last confrontation, because Homelander increasingly feels less like a superhero and more like an empire, and empires fall, but usually at terrible cost. And that's where the story stands. A world on edge, a god losing control, a son who may shape the future, a dying man willing to do anything, and a war that now feels unavoidable. Because what began as one man seeking justice after losing everything has become a battle over whether absolute power will finally be challenged, or finally win. And somehow, after everything we've seen, the worst may still be ahead.